The number appeared on the screen at 14:37 local time, in a reinforced observation bunker buried in the side of a ridge in the Jordanian desert. It appeared in clean white digits on a black background, the font the military uses when it wants numbers to be read without ambiguity, without interpretation, without the possibility of a decimal point being mistaken for a speck of dust on a monitor. 3,812 meters. 1 round. 1 moving target. 1 confirmed hit. In a sandstorm, the room had 11 people in it. 9 of them were men who had spent their entire careers around precision weapon systems and long-range ballistic platforms and advanced targeting technology that cost more per unit than most people's houses. One of them was a woman who had designed the rifle that had just been fired. And one of them was a 2-star general named Richard Holt, whose mouth was open but whose vocal cords appeared to have temporarily resigned from service. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment telling me what country you're from. I need to see how far this reaches. And if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and hit that button because what I'm about to tell you is going to take a while and you are going to want to be here for every single second of it. Let me take you back. 22 hours earlier. Before the sandstorm. Before the shot. Before everything changed. The C-17 touched down at Al Rashid Proving Ground at 4:15 in the morning, which in the Jordanian desert in July meant the temperature was already 94 degrees Fahrenheit and climbing with the enthusiasm of something that had places to be and wanted to get there quickly. The Proving Ground was a joint U.S.-Jordanian facility built into 340 square kilometers of nothing. Sand, rock, heat, and the occasional confused lizard who had clearly made poor life decisions about where to establish a home. The rear ramp lowered and Sergeant First Class Nadia Vasquez walked down it carrying a rifle case that weighed 42 pounds and a duffel bag that weighed considerably less because Nadia Vasquez had learned a very long time ago that the things you actually need in life fit in a surprisingly small space. She was 34 years old, 5'6", dark hair pulled back tight in the way that women in the military learn to wear it because anything else becomes a conversation that has nothing to do with your capability and everything to do with someone else's opinion about your appearance. Her face had the particular quality of someone who listened more than she spoke and processed more than she showed, and had arranged both of those habits so deeply into her personality that most people mistook them for quietness when they were actually the opposite. She was quiet the way a loaded weapon is quiet. Not empty, just waiting for the appropriate moment. She had been told very little about why she was here. Her orders said, Advanced Weapons Platform Evaluation, Precision Systems Division. Her orders did not say that the evaluation was being overseen by Major General Richard Holt, which would have been useful information because Nadia had a file in her head that she kept on people whose opinions about her she would need to navigate, and Holt's name would have gone directly into that file in bold, underlined, with a small note that said, Prepare accordingly. But nobody told her. So she walked off the plane and into the heat, and the first face she saw was Master Sergeant Cole Briggs, who was leaning against a dusty Humvee with 2 cups of coffee and the expression of a man who had been awake for several hours and had opinions about it. Vasquez, he said. He handed her a cup. Briggs. She took it. What haven't they told me? Briggs was her spotter. Had been for 3 years across 2 deployments and 1 deeply unpleasant training exercise in Alaska that neither of them discussed because some experiences are better left in the category of things that happened that we have agreed to never speak of again. He was 41, built like someone had assembled a human being from materials specifically chosen for durability, and he had the particular loyalty of a man who had watched his partner do things through a spotting scope that he still wasn't entirely sure he believed, even though he had seen them with his own eyes. Holt, Briggs said. Who's Holt? 2-star. Runs the evaluation committee. Career artillery officer who transferred into weapons procurement 6 years ago. Briggs paused. He has opinions. Everyone has opinions. His opinions have stars on them. Nadia drank her coffee. It was terrible. Military coffee existed not to provide pleasure, but to remind you that you were in a place where pleasure was not the operational priority. What kind of opinions? She asked. Briggs looked at her with the expression of someone choosing their next words carefully. He made a comment at the pre-evaluation briefing yesterday. Someone asked about the shooter candidates. He asked about backgrounds. When your file came up, Briggs stopped. Say it. He said, She's not qualified. He said it in a room full of people. And then he said something else that I'm not going to repeat because I'm your spotter and your friend, and if I repeat it, You'll be angry, and angry doesn't help us right now. Nadia finished her coffee. She set the cup on the hood of the Humvee. She looked at the desert stretching out in every direction, colorless and vast and absolutely indifferent to the concerns of human beings who had decided to bring their complicated feelings about capability and gender into an environment that would kill both genders with equal enthusiasm if given the opportunity. Good, she said. Briggs blinked. Good. He doesn't think I'm qualified. That means his expectations are low. She picked up her rifle case. Low expectations are the best gift anyone's ever given me. The evaluation facility was a concrete structure that looked like someone had dropped a warehouse in the middle of the desert and then forgotten about it for several years. Inside, it was considerably more sophisticated. Climate-controlled observation rooms. Ballistic tracking systems that could measure the spin rate of a projectile at distances that would make most measuring instruments file formal complaints. Communication arrays linked to satellite monitoring. The full architecture of serious weapons testing, built by people who understood that measuring the performance of precision systems was itself a precision exercise. There were 4 shooter candidates. Nadia was the only woman. The other 3 were men she knew by reputation and in one case personally. Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb, a Marine Scout sniper with 14 years of operational experience. Sergeant First Class Tony DiMartino, Army Special Forces, who held the current U.S. military record for confirmed long-range engagement at 2,430 meters. And Chief Petty Officer Alexei Volkov, Navy, whose parents had emigrated from Russia when he was 7 and who had grown up on a farm in Nebraska and discovered at 16 that he could put a bullet through a playing card at 800 yards, which is the kind of discovery that changes the trajectory of a life in very specific and permanent ways. They were good. All 3 of them. Nadia knew this because she had studied their records the way she studied everything. Completely, methodically, and without any emotion that would interfere with an accurate assessment. She also knew she was better. Not because she was arrogant, because the mathematics told her so. This is the part of the story where I need to explain something about Nadia Vasquez that will become important later, and then become very important after that, and then become the only thing that matters by the end. So stay with me. Nadia Vasquez had a condition. Not a medical one. Cognitive one. The clinical term is hypercalculia, and it is extraordinarily rare, and it means that the part of her brain responsible for mathematical processing operated at a level that most neuroscientists would describe as unusual, and that the one neuroscientist who had actually examined her at age 12 had described, in his notes, as "I have no adequate framework for what I am observing." She did not see the world the way most people saw it. She saw it in variables. Wind was not just wind. It was a vector with magnitude and direction and rate of change and interaction patterns with terrain features and temperature gradients. Distance was not just far. It was a number that connected to other numbers: bullet drop, time of flight, Coriolis drift, spin drift, air density, and those numbers assembled themselves in her mind not as a sequence of calculations but as a shape. A complete, instantaneous shape, the way a musician hears a chord rather than individual notes. She had been found by the military the same way the military finds all of its most useful instruments. By accident. A recruiting sergeant at a job fair in Albuquerque had noticed a 19-year-old girl solving a Rubik's Cube in under 30 seconds while simultaneously carrying on a conversation about the aerodynamics of paper airplanes with a physics professor who had not realized until 4 minutes into the conversation that he was being intellectually outpaced by someone who had never taken a college course. The recruiting sergeant had filed a note. The note had moved through channels. The channels had eventually delivered her to a shooting range at Fort Benning, where a quiet instructor named Sergeant Major Ellen Park had watched her fire 10 rounds at 600 meters and grouped them inside a circle smaller than a quarter. And Sergeant Major Park had picked up her phone and called someone and said, "I have someone you need to see." That was 12 years ago. What had happened between then and the moment she stepped off a C-17 in the Jordanian desert was a career that existed in the spaces between official records. Operations that appeared in files with limited distribution classifications. Engagements that were confirmed in person by people who shook her hand afterward and then never spoke her name in any room that contained a recording device. She was, by any measure that the military took seriously, one of the 5 most capable precision shooters on the planet. But her file read like the file of someone who had done nothing particularly remarkable, because the remarkable things she had done were not the kind of things that appeared in files. which meant that when Major General Richard Holt opened her evaluation folder and saw a Sergeant First Class with no combat decorations of note, no sniper school instructor credentials, no published papers on ballistic theory, and no record of competitive shooting at the inter-service level, he saw exactly what someone sees when they are looking at a surface without understanding that the surface exists specifically to conceal what's underneath. The evaluation briefing happened at 6 o'clock. The room was cool and bright and had the particular institutional energy of a space where important people were about to say important things to less important people. General Holt was at the front. He was tall, silver-haired, 58 years old, with the kind of jaw that looked like it had been designed by someone who wanted to communicate authority before the mouth above it opened. He wore his stars the way certain men wear expensive watches, not to tell time, but to make sure you know what time it is. "Good morning," he said. His voice filled the room the way a faucet fills a glass. Efficiently, completely, without wasted effort. "You have been selected for the Phase 3 evaluation of the XR-14 Advanced Precision Platform. The XR-14 represents a generational advancement in long-range engagement capability. Your job over the next 48 hours is to demonstrate whether or not a human operator can exploit the platform's theoretical capability envelope under field conditions." He looked at the room. His eyes moved across the 4 candidates. They paused on Nadia for approximately 1.5 seconds longer than they paused on anyone else. "Some of you," he said, "have extensive experience with advanced platforms. Some of you have records that speak for themselves." He did not look at Nadia when he said this. He didn't need to. The omission was the statement. Beside Nadia, Briggs's jaw tightened fractionally. She put her hand on his forearm. He relaxed. Fractionally. Captain James Park, Ghost to everyone who had ever worked with him. A nickname earned not because he was dead but because he had the particular talent of being in rooms without anyone noticing until he spoke. Was seated 2 rows back. He had been the one who had submitted Nadia's name for the evaluation. He had done so over Holt's objection. He had done so by going around Holt to the Deputy Secretary of Defense, who had served with Park's father and who owed the Park family a favor that had something to do with a situation in the Philippines in 1998 that nobody discussed in specific terms. Ghost watched Holt's performance with the patient expression of a man who had placed a very large bet and was perfectly comfortable waiting for the cards to be dealt. The briefing continued. The evaluation structure was straightforward. 3 phases of shooting, each at increasing distance and increasing complexity. Phase 1 was static targets at ranges from 1,000 to 2,000 meters. Phase 2 was moving targets at ranges from 2,000 to 3,000 meters. Phase 3 was described in the briefing materials simply as extended range engagement under variable conditions, with no specific distance listed, which was the kind of bureaucratic vagueness that meant either "we haven't decided yet" or "we've decided and we don't want to tell you because the number would cause problems." Dr. Amara Osei, the ballistic scientist who had designed the XR-14, gave the technical briefing. She was Nigerian-British, mid-40s, with the energy of someone who had spent 8 years building something and was finally about to find out if it worked the way her mathematics said it should. She explained the weapon system with the careful enthusiasm of a person who loves what they have created but understands that loving it too visibly in a room full of military professionals would be counterproductive. The XR-14 was, in the simplest possible terms, a rifle built around a bullet. Most weapon systems started with a caliber, a platform concept, and operational requirement. Dr. Osei had started with a mathematical problem. What is the maximum distance at which a projectile can be guided to a target by a human operator using no electronic assistance? Not a computer. Not a targeting system. A human mind making real-time calculations and a human hand making the corresponding adjustments. The answer she had arrived at, after 8 years and roughly 14,000 pages of computational modeling, was somewhere between 3,500 and 4,000 meters. And she had built a weapon system specifically designed to operate in that range. The theoretical maximum, Dr. Osei said, looking at the candidates with the expression of a scientist about to hand someone a very expensive experiment and hoping they would not drop it, is 4,200 meters. This is the distance at which the projectile's aerodynamic characteristics, combined with atmospheric variables, begin to exceed what we believe any human operator can compensate for in real time. She paused. I should note that no human operator, has successfully engaged a target beyond 3,400 meters with this or any platform under any conditions. DiMartino, seated to Nadia's left, leaned over. So they built a gun that nobody can shoot, he whispered. They built a gun that nobody has shot yet, Nadia whispered back. Those are different sentences. DiMartino looked at her. He smiled slightly. He had the particular intelligence of a competitive person who recognizes another competitive person and adjusts their internal ranking accordingly. The briefing ended. Holt stood at the front of the room as the candidates filed out and said nothing more. But as Nadia passed him, he spoke. Sergeant Vasquez. She stopped. She turned. She met his eyes. Hers had the quality of still water. Deep and reflective and revealing nothing about what moved underneath. Sir, I've reviewed your file. He held her gaze. I want to be direct with you. I have concerns about whether your operational background has prepared you adequately for this evaluation. The room was still emptying. People were listening while trying to appear as though they were not listening, which is a social skill that military professionals develop to a very high level because the military runs on information and information runs on people who know how to collect it without appearing to. I appreciate your directness, sir, Nadia said. Her voice was even. Completely even. The kind of even that takes considerable skill to maintain when someone with 2 stars is telling you in public that they think you don't belong here. My file reflects my assignments as documented. I'm happy to let the evaluation speak for itself. That's what I'm concerned about, Holt said, and something in his tone made the room temperature drop 2 degrees, because what he was communicating underneath the words was not concern. It was a conclusion. He had already decided. The evaluation, in his mind, was a formality that would confirm what he already knew. Nadia held his gaze for 2 more seconds. Not challenging. Not submitting. Just holding. The way someone holds a position they have already decided not to move from. Understood, sir, she said. She walked out. Briggs was waiting in the corridor. He looked at her face and said, How bad? He's already written the report, she said. He's just waiting for the data to justify it. What are you going to do? She kept walking. Give him data he can't justify ignoring. Phase 1 began at 7:30. The range extended south from the facility into the flat desert, marked at intervals with target systems that could present static steel silhouettes at distances calibrated to within 3 centimeters of their documented range. The wind was steady at 14 kilometers per hour from the northwest. Temperature was 41 degrees Celsius. Humidity was functionally 0, which simplified certain atmospheric calculations and complicated others because dry air at high temperature behaves differently than humid air at high temperature in ways that matter enormously when you are asking a projectile to travel a very long distance. The candidates shot in order: Webb, DiMartino, Volkov, Vasquez. Webb was excellent. He grouped his shots at 1,000 meters in a pattern that would have won competitions. His 1,500-meter grouping was outstanding. At 2,000 meters, he produced a grouping that the tracking system measured at 0.78 MOA, which in non-technical language means he was putting bullets inside a circle roughly the size of a large orange at a distance of just over a mile. DiMartino was better. His 2,000-meter grouping measured 0.62 MOA. He did this while maintaining a shot cadence that was noticeably faster than Webb's, which in the precision shooting community is the equivalent of running a 4-minute mile while juggling. Not strictly necessary, but deeply impressive. Volkov was better still. 0.54 MOA at 2,000. The observation room made sounds. Small sounds. The sounds that people who understand what they are seeing make when they see something exceptional. Then Nadia. She did not hurry. She settled behind the XR-14 the way a pianist settles at an instrument. Not arranging herself around it, but arranging it around herself. Her body found positions that the rifle's ergonomics had been designed to accommodate, and she found those positions in roughly 8 seconds, which told Dr. Osei, watching from the observation room, that this woman understood the weapon system at a level that Dr. Osei had not expected any of the candidates to reach without significantly more familiarization time. Briggs was beside her. He read atmospherics from his instruments. Wind 14 northwest. No gusts. Temperature stable. Mirage moderate. Left to right. I see it, Nadia said. She fired. She fired 5 rounds at 1,000 meters. She fired 5 rounds at 1,500 meters. She fired 5 rounds at 2,000 meters. She fired at a pace that was neither fast nor slow but had the particular rhythm of someone who was not thinking about the mechanics of what they were doing because the mechanics had been internalized so completely that they ran the way breathing runs, automatically, below the level of conscious attention, freeing the conscious mind for the calculations that actually required it. The tracking system logged her results. 1,000 meters, 0.19 MOA. The observation room went quiet. 1,500 meters, 0.23 MOA. Someone said a word that was technically not appropriate in a professional military environment. 2,000 meters, 0.31 MOA. Specialist Danny Reeves, the youngest person in the observation room at 24, who had been assigned to the evaluation as a technical data logger, and who had been doing this job long enough to understand what the numbers meant but not long enough to control his reactions to them, said out loud, "That's not possible." Dr. Osei, seated beside him, said nothing. But she was gripping the edge of her chair with both hands, and her eyes had the particular brightness of a person watching their life's work being validated in real time by someone who might actually be capable of doing what the mathematics had always said was theoretically achievable. General Holt was standing at the back of the observation room. He had watched the numbers appear on screen. He had not spoken. His expression had the quality of a man trying to maintain a position that the evidence was actively undermining. Colonel Sarah Whitfield, the oversight officer who reported directly to the Pentagon's testing authority, looked at Holt. She looked at the screen. She looked back at Holt. "General," she said, "would you like to revise your preliminary assessment?" Holt said, "Phase 1 is a controlled environment. Anyone can shoot well in controlled conditions." Whitfield looked at him for a moment. Then she turned back to the screen and wrote something in her notebook that she underlined twice. Phase 2 began at 1400 hours after a 4-hour break, during which the candidates ate and rested, and Nadia lay on a cot in her assigned quarters and stared at the ceiling and ran calculations for the wind patterns she had observed during the morning session, and the way those patterns were likely to shift as the afternoon temperature rose and the thermal dynamics of the desert surface changed. Briggs brought her food. She ate it without commenting on it because military food in the desert was not a topic that rewarded commentary. "DiMartino wants to talk to you," Briggs said. "About what?" "He wants to know how you did that." "Did what?" "The 0.31 at 2,000. I pulled the trigger and the bullet went where I calculated it would go." Briggs looked at her. "He's going to ask you directly." "Then I'll tell him directly." She sat up. The difference between 0.54 and 0.31 at 2,000 meters is approximately the width of a human hair of additional precision in the initial hold point. Volkov was shooting at the target. I was shooting at a point inside the target that I had already determined was the optimal impact location given the specific combination of wind, temperature, humidity, mirage, and Coriolis drift active at that moment. "He's going to ask how you determine that point." "I look at the world and it tells me." Briggs was quiet for a moment. "You know that sounds insane." "I know exactly how it sounds. It also happens to be accurate." Phase 2 was moving targets. Steel silhouettes mounted on mechanized tracks that traveled at variable speeds across the engagement window at distances of 2,000, 2,500, and 3,000 meters. The targets moved at speeds calibrated to simulate a walking human, a slow-moving vehicle, and a fast-moving vehicle. The engagement window, the amount of time the target was visible before it passed behind a terrain feature, decreased with each distance increase. At 3,000 meters, the engagement window was 4.2 seconds. The time of flight for the XR-14's projectile at that distance was approximately 3.7 seconds, which meant the shooter had to fire within 0.5 seconds of the target becoming visible and had to calculate the lead, the distance ahead of the target the bullet needed to be aimed, while compensating for wind, drop, drift, and the target's speed and direction. In 0.5 seconds, Webb hit the 2,000-meter moving target. He missed the 2,500. He missed the 3,000 twice before connecting on his third allowed attempt. DiMartino hit 2,000 and 2,500 clean. He missed his first attempt at 3,000 and hit his second. The observation room applauded. It was a remarkable shot. DiMartino acknowledged it with a nod and a small smile that said he knew exactly how good it was and did not need anyone else to tell him. Volkov hit all three clean. First attempt each. The observation room did not applaud this time. They were too busy processing. Volkov shot the way water moves downhill, inevitably, without apparent effort, as though the outcome had been decided before the action began. Then Nadia. Briggs read atmospherics. The wind had shifted. It was now 18 kilometers per hour from the west with periodic gusts to 24. The temperature had risen to 46 degrees Celsius. The mirage, the heat distortion rising from the desert floor that bends light and makes distant objects appear to shimmer and shift, was now severe. At 2,000 meters, Nadia hit the moving target 0.3 seconds after it appeared. Center mass. The tracking system registered the point of impact as 1.2 centimeters from geometric center. At 2,500 meters, she hit the moving target 0.4 seconds after it appeared. Center mass. 1.8 centimeters from geometric center. At 3,000 meters, something happened that specialist Danny Reeves would talk about for the rest of his career, which would turn out to be a very long one, because what he witnessed in that observation room would fundamentally alter the trajectory of his professional life and redirect him toward ballistics research in a way that he had not anticipated when he woke up that morning. The target appeared. It was moving at fast vehicle speed, roughly 30 kilometers per hour, traversing left to right across the engagement window. The engagement window was 4.2 seconds. The time of flight was 3.7 seconds. The wind gusted to 26 kilometers per hour in the moment the target appeared. Nadia fired at 0.3 seconds. The room watched the tracking display. The projectile left the barrel and climbed into the air and began its long arc across 3,000 meters of atmosphere that was trying very hard to interfere with its trajectory. Wind pushed it. Gravity pulled it. The rotation of the Earth itself nudged it fractionally to the right. 3.7 seconds of flight time during which the bullet was alone in the sky and subject to every force the environment could bring to bear on it. It hit the target 4.0 seconds after the target appeared. Moving target. 30 kilometers per hour. 3,000 meters. Impact point. 0.7 centimeters from geometric center. Danny Reeves stood up from his chair. He didn't mean to. His body simply decided that this was a standing-up situation and enacted the decision without consulting him. That's, he said. He stopped. He looked at Dr. Osei. Is that real? The tracking system doesn't make errors at these distances, Dr. Osei said. Her voice was quiet. The quiet of someone who has just watched a theoretical possibility become a physical reality. It's real. She compensated for the gust, Reeves said. He was working it out as he spoke. The wind changed during the flight time. She calculated the initial solution based on a wind speed that didn't exist when she pulled the trigger because she had already determined that the gust would change during the 3.7 seconds of flight time, and she calculated where the bullet would need to start in order to end up where it needed to end up after the wind had finished doing what the wind was going to do. He stopped. He looked at the screen. He looked at Dr. Osei. She shot the future, he said. General Holt left the observation room. He did not speak as he left. Colonel Whitfield watched him go and wrote something else in her notebook. Phase 3 was scheduled for the following morning. The candidates were given the evening to rest, prepare, and familiarize themselves further with the XR-14. Nadia spent 90 minutes with the rifle in a maintenance bay, disassembling and reassembling components with the careful attention of someone learning a language by reading its grammar rather than memorizing phrases. DiMartino found her there. Vasquez. DiMartino. He pulled up a chair. He sat down. He watched her work for a minute. Then he said, Briggs told me what you said about the hold point. The hair's width difference. That's accurate. I know it's accurate. That's why I'm here. He leaned forward. I've been doing this for 14 years. I hold the service record. I am very good at what I do. Yes, she said. You are. You're better. She stopped working. She looked at him. She could have deflected. She could have been modest. She chose not to, because DiMartino had given her honesty and she respected him enough to return it. Yes, she said. I am. He nodded. He did not appear offended. He appeared, if anything, relieved, The way a person is relieved when a suspicion they have been carrying is confirmed and they can stop carrying it. How far can you actually shoot? He asked. I don't know yet, she said. That's what tomorrow is for. He looked at her for a long moment. Good luck, he said. He meant it. She could tell. You too. He stood. He walked to the door. He stopped. Holt's going to try to disqualify you. I overheard him on the phone with someone at CENTCOM. He's calling your results anomalous and requesting a review of the tracking system calibration. Nadia's hands went still on the rifle. Not in anger. In calculation. He can't change the numbers, she said. He can delay what they mean. He can't change what they are. DiMartino looked at her. You're not worried. I'm not worried about the numbers. I'm worried about the weather. She glanced at her phone. A meteorological display showed a pressure system moving across the region from the southwest. There's a storm coming. Sand. Significant. DiMartino whistled low. Phase 3 in a sandstorm. That's what I'm thinking about, Nadia said. That's the only thing I'm thinking about. She was right about the storm. By 5 o'clock the following morning, the meteorological data was unambiguous. A major sandstorm was tracking northeast across the desert, carrying winds that would reach the proving ground between 10 o'clock and 12 o'clock local time. Sustained winds of 60 to 80 kilometers per hour. Visibility reduction to under 500 meters. Particulate density sufficient to degrade optical systems and create atmospheric conditions that no ballistic model in any military database had been designed to account for. The evaluation committee met at 6 o'clock. Holt recommended postponement. His reasoning was sound on the surface. Phase 3 required optimal conditions to accurately assess the platform's extended range capability. Conducting the evaluation in a sandstorm would introduce uncontrolled variables that would make the results unreliable. Colonel Whitfield listened to this and then said, General, with respect, the purpose of Phase 3 as described in the evaluation charter is to assess human operator capability under variable conditions. A sandstorm is a variable condition. It's an extreme variable condition, Holt said. The charter doesn't distinguish between variable and extreme variable, Whitfield replied. And I'd argue that if we're evaluating whether this platform can operate in the real world is where sandstorms happen. The candidates can decide for themselves whether they wish to attempt Phase 3 under these conditions. I'd suggest we give them the choice. Holt did not like this, but Whitfield had the authority of the Pentagon Testing Office behind her, which was a different kind of authority than STARS, less visible but in certain situations considerably more difficult to override. The candidates were assembled. The situation was explained. Phase 3 would proceed as scheduled, with the sandstorm expected to arrive during the engagement window. Any candidate who chose not to participate under these conditions would be given a second opportunity when conditions normalized. No judgment, no penalty. Webb chose to wait. His reasoning was practical and honest. I've got a wife and 2 kids. I don't need to prove anything to anyone in a sandstorm. Nobody judged him for this. Webb was a professional and his decision was a professional one. DiMartino chose to shoot. Volkov chose to shoot. Both of them looked at Nadia when she said, I'll shoot. And then something happened that changed the shape of the entire day. Captain James Park, Ghost, walked into the briefing room. He was holding a tablet. His face had the expression of a man carrying information that was going to rearrange everyone's priorities. General Holt, he said, we have a situation. The situation was this. A forward observation post, designated OP Lancer, positioned 22 kilometers northeast of the proving ground, had reported contact with an unidentified armed group moving south through a canyon system toward a small Jordanian border village. The group numbered approximately 15. They were armed with military-grade weapons, and their trajectory would bring them to the village within 3 hours. The village had 340 people in it, including a school with 60 children. The nearest quick reaction force was 4 hours out by ground and 90 minutes by helicopter, but the sandstorm was going to ground all helicopter operations within the hour. The observation post had identified what appeared to be a vehicle-mounted weapon system, a technical with a heavy machine gun, leading the group through the canyon. The terrain allowed only one approach to the village, and that approach passed through a narrow section of the canyon where the vehicle would be exposed for a brief window before reaching cover that would carry it directly to the village's northern perimeter. The distance from the only viable overwatch position to that exposure point was 3,800 meters. The room went very quiet. Ghost looked at Holt. "We need a shooter, sir. Someone who can hit a moving vehicle at 3,800 meters through a sandstorm in a single engagement window that we estimate at approximately 5 seconds. Nobody in the room looked at Nadia, but everyone in the room was thinking about her. Holt's face moved through several expressions in rapid succession. None of them were comfortable. "That distance," he said, "is beyond the operational envelope of any platform we have in theater. It's within the theoretical envelope of the XR-14, Dr. Osei said from the back of the room. "If the operator can manage the atmospheric compensation." "In a sandstorm," Holt said. "Yes," Osei said. "In a sandstorm." Another silence. The kind of silence that happens when the theoretical becomes operational and the numbers become lives. Nadia stood up. "I can make that shot," she said. Every head in the room turned. "Sergeant," Holt said. His voice carried something new. Not the dismissiveness from before. Something else. Something that sounded, underneath the authority, like the beginning of a question he did not want to ask. "You're telling me you can hit a moving vehicle at 3,800 meters in conditions that will reduce visibility to near zero?" "I'm telling you that the mathematics support it," she said. "The XR-14's ballistic profile at 3,800 meters requires a flight time of approximately 5.2 seconds. The vehicle's speed through the canyon narrows based on the terrain analysis Captain Park just showed us will be approximately 15 to 20 kilometers per hour. The engagement window is 5 seconds. She paused. "It's tight. It's not impossible. The sandstorm introduces a particulate variable that will affect the projectile's flight characteristics in ways that standard atmospheric models don't cover." She looked at Dr. Osei. But Dr. Osei's modeling includes particulate density coefficients that she built into the XR-14's design specifications because she anticipated that any weapon system operating at these distances would eventually be used in exactly this kind of environment. Osei's eyes widened slightly. "You read the technical specifications?" "I read everything," Nadia said. "That's how I know the rifle was designed for this. The question isn't whether the platform can do it. The question is whether I can do the math fast enough." She looked at Holt. "I can do the math fast enough, sir." The room hung suspended. Holt looked at her. He looked at her the way you look at something when every assumption you have been carrying is being rearranged by new information and the rearrangement is happening too fast for the defensive structures of your ego to keep up. "General," Whitfield said quietly, "we have 340 civilians and 60 children." Holt closed his eyes for 1 second. When he opened them, something had changed. Not everything. Not yet. But something. "Get her to that overwatch position," he said. "Now." They moved by vehicle because the helicopters were already grounded. Nadia, Briggs, Ghost, and a 4-person security element drove 22 kilometers northeast through conditions that were deteriorating by the minute. The sky had turned the color of rust. The wind was building. Sand was beginning to move across the ground in low waves that looked like something alive, something crawling toward them across the desert floor. They reached the overwatch position, a rocky outcropping on the eastern wall of the canyon, at 9:47. The sandstorm was 30 minutes from full intensity. Visibility was already dropping. Through her scope, Nadia could see the canyon narrows 3,800 meters to the north. She could see the approach route. She could see the exposure window, a gap between two rock formations approximately 40 meters wide through which the vehicle would have to pass. 40 meters at 3,800 meters. In 5 seconds. In a sandstorm. "Briggs," she said. She was already settling behind the XR-14, her body finding its positions, her mind beginning to fill with the shapes of numbers that were about to become the most important numbers she had ever calculated. Briggs was beside her, spotting scope, instruments. His face had the particular expression of a man who has followed someone to the edge of what is possible and is perfectly content to be there because he trusts the person standing on that edge more than he trusts the edge itself. Wind 42 kilometers per hour from the southwest. Gusting to 55. Particulate density is... He paused. He looked at his instruments. It's climbing fast. Give me the rate. Increasing approximately 12% every 4 minutes. Nadia closed her eyes. Inside her mind, the shape assembled. Wind speed, gust pattern, particulate density and its rate of increase, temperature, altitude differential between her position and the target zone, the Coriolis effect at this latitude, the specific ballistic coefficient of the XR-14's projectile as it would interact with air laden with particulate matter of the size and density characteristic of a Jordanian desert sandstorm. The vehicle's likely speed through the narrows given the road surface and the gradient. The shape was complex. It was the most complex shape she had ever held in her mind. It had more variables than any engagement she had ever calculated. Some of those variables were changing in real time. Some of them were changing at rates that were themselves changing. She held them all. Ghost's radio crackled. OP Lancer reports the group is 12 minutes from the narrows. Vehicle is leading. Confirmed heavy weapon mounted. 12 minutes, Nadia said. She opened her eyes. She looked through the scope. The canyon narrows were visible but degrading. The sand was thickening in the air. In 12 minutes, she would be shooting through an atmosphere that was trying very hard to make precision impossible. Briggs, I need you to read me particulate density every 30 seconds starting now. Don't stop. Don't summarize. Just give me the number. Copy. And Briggs. Yeah. Thank you for being here. He looked at her. In 3 years of working together, she had never said that. Not because she didn't feel it, but because she expressed important things so rarely that when she did, the words carried a weight that ordinary conversation could not support. Nowhere else I'd be, he said. She smiled. It was a real smile. Brief but real. Then she stopped smiling and she put her eye to the scope and the world narrowed to a circle of light that contained 3,800 meters of hostile atmosphere and a gap between two rocks where a vehicle carrying a weapon system was about to appear, and behind that vehicle was a canyon that led to a village where 60 children were sitting in a school and did not know that a woman they would never meet was about to perform a calculation that would determine whether their day ended in mathematics or in something unimaginably worse. The minutes passed. Briggs read particulate numbers. The wind screamed. Sand hammered the rocks around them. Ghost crouched behind a boulder and relayed updates from OP Lancer. 4 minutes. Nadia's breathing slowed. Her heartbeat dropped. Not through conscious effort but through a physiological response that her body had learned over 12 years of training. The response of a system that understood at a cellular level that stillness was survival and stillness was precision and precision was the entire point. 2 minutes. The shape in her mind was complete now. Every variable accounted for. Every rate of change integrated. The solution existed as a point in space, not where the target would be, but where the bullet needed to be when it left the barrel in order to arrive at the point where the target would be 5.2 seconds later after traveling through 3,800 meters of sand-filled, wind-torn, gravity-governed atmosphere. She shot the future. That was what Danny Reeves had said. He was right. 1 minute. Particulate density 847 micrograms per cubic meter. Wind 51 southwest. Gust 63. She made the final adjustment. A fraction of a degree. Less than the width of a human hair in the movement of her hands. The most important fraction of a degree in her life. Contact, Ghost said. Vehicle entering the approach. She could see it. A shape in the murk. Moving. The heavy weapon visible on the back. Figures around it. Human beings with weapons moving toward a village of 340 people. The vehicle entered the narrows. She had 5 seconds. She fired at second 0.4. The rifle kicked against her shoulder with the particular authority of a weapon system designed to send a projectile to a specific point in space at a specific moment in time. The bullet left the barrel and entered the sandstorm and disappeared. 5.2 seconds. She counted them, not consciously. Her body counted them the way it counted heartbeats, automatically with the certainty of a system that knows its own rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Briggs was watching through the spotting scope. Even through the reduced visibility, even through the sand, even through 3,800 meters of atmosphere that was doing everything in its physical power to interfere with observation. The scope was powerful enough to see what happened next. The vehicle stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. The engine block. She had calculated for the engine block. Not the cabin, not the weapon system, not the figures around it. The engine block, because a vehicle without a functioning engine is a vehicle that goes nowhere, and a vehicle that goes nowhere is a threat that has been neutralized without a single additional round being required. Hit, Briggs said. His voice cracked on the word. Not from emotion. From the physical effort of not expressing the emotion that was trying to exit his body through every available channel. Confirmed hit. Vehicle disabled. Ghost was on the radio immediately. OP Lancer, target vehicle disabled. I repeat, target vehicle is disabled at the Narrows. Group is halted. Request QRF advance when weather permits. The armed group, suddenly without their primary weapons platform and very suddenly aware that someone had reached out and touched their vehicle from a distance that should not have been possible, did what human beings do when confronted with evidence that the situation they are in has changed in a way that they did not anticipate and cannot control. They scattered. They scattered into the canyon and the desert, and the sandstorm swallowed them, and the village stayed quiet, and the school stayed standing, and 60 children would go home to their families that afternoon without knowing that the distance between their ordinary day and an unimaginable one had been exactly 3,800 meters, and one woman's refusal to accept that the mathematics said impossible. The mathematics had never said impossible. The mathematics had said difficult. Nadia Vasquez understood the difference. Back at the proving ground, the tracking data from the Overwatch position had been transmitted in real time to the observation bunker. The number appeared on the screen at 1437, 3,812 meters. Moving target. Sandstorm. 1 round. General Richard Holt was in the room when the number appeared. He was the man whose mouth opened and whose vocal cords resigned. He stood there for approximately 45 seconds. The room was silent around him. People waited. Then he did something that Colonel Whitfield would later describe in her evaluation report as the single most significant indicator of professional integrity I observed during the entire assessment. He walked to the communication terminal. He picked up the handset. He called the Overwatch position. Nadia answered. Sergeant Vasquez, Holt said. His voice was different now. Not the voice of a man performing authority. The voice of a man who had been wrong and knew it and had decided that being wrong was less important than what happened next. Sir, that was the finest piece of shooting I have ever witnessed in 34 years of military service. Silence on the line. I owe you an apology, he said. Not a private one, public one. You'll have it. Another silence. Then Nadia's voice, steady, quiet, carrying the weight of everything she had held and calculated and endured and refused to let stop her. Thank you, General. But the people who need to hear from you right now are in a village 22 kilometers from here. They don't know what almost happened to them today. And they don't need to. But if you have resources to send, medical, supplies, infrastructure, that village could use them. Holt was quiet for a long moment. Consider it done, he said. He hung up. He turned to the room. He looked at the faces looking at him. Dr. Osei, he said. Sir, your weapon system works. Recommend immediate progression to operational deployment. Full funding. No restrictions. Osei nodded. She was gripping the edge of her chair again. Her eyes were very bright. And Dr. Osei? Sir, next time you build something like this, build two. Because I have a feeling Sergeant Vasquez is going to wear this one out. Specialist Danny Reeves laughed. It was the first sound in the room since the number had appeared on the screen. It broke the tension the way a single crack breaks a dam, and the room exhaled collectively, and people began to talk, and the ordinary sound of human voices processing an extraordinary event filled the space and made it normal again. Almost normal, because nothing, after a moment like that, is ever quite the same as it was before. 3 days later, Nadia was on a flight home. Briggs was beside her, asleep, because Briggs could sleep on any surface in any vehicle in any time zone. A skill he attributed to 20 years of practice and absolutely no imagination. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ghost. Holt submitted his evaluation report. rated you as the highest performing candidate in the history of the Advanced Weapons Platform Assessment Program. Direct quote from his summary. SFC Vasquez demonstrated capabilities that redefine the operational parameters of precision engagement. Her performance under extreme conditions represents a standard against which all future candidates should be measured. She read it. She read it again. She looked out the window at the clouds below them, white and endless and indifferent to the concerns of the people flying above them, the way the desert was indifferent, the way the ocean was indifferent, the way the mathematics was indifferent. The mathematics didn't care who she was. It didn't care about her gender or her background or what anyone thought about her qualifications. It only cared about whether the numbers were right. The numbers were always right. She closed her eyes. She thought about 60 children going home from school on an ordinary afternoon. She thought about a village that would receive medical supplies and infrastructure support from a 2-star general who had learned something about his own assumptions. She thought about a rifle designed by a Nigerian-British scientist who had spent 8 years solving a mathematical problem that nobody else believed was worth solving. She thought about a spotter who had said, "Nowhere else I'd be," in a sandstorm at the edge of what was possible. And she thought about a 15-year-old girl in Albuquerque who had solved a Rubik's Cube at a job fair and talked to a physics professor about paper airplanes and had not known, could not possibly have known, that the strange, beautiful way her mind turned the world into numbers and shapes and patterns that other people couldn't see was not a quirk or an oddity or a party trick, but a gift that would one day, on a Tuesday in July in a sandstorm in the Jordanian desert, save 340 lives from 3,800 meters away. She smiled, the same smile from the Overwatch position. Brief, real. Then she slept. And 8,000 miles away, in a village whose name does not appear on most maps, 60 children woke up for another ordinary day. And none of them knew, and none of them needed to, because that, in the end, is the point. The people who are protected never see the mathematics. They only see the morning. If the story hit you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't. And remember, the next time someone tells you that you're not qualified, smile. Low expectations are the best gift anyone can give you. Part 2 is coming. And what happens next? You are not ready for it.